Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with hot honey drumsticks. That's right, we're giving the sweet heat treatment to America's fourth most popular chicken part. Although I've heard from some of the cool kids, these are gaining in popularity, and I'd like to think this recipe might help the cause. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by transferring some drumsticks into a zip top bag that we will place in a bowl in case there's leakage. Oh, and by the way, we're not supposed to call these chicken legs, since a drumstick is only half a chicken leg, with the other half, of course, being the thigh. And I only mention this in case someone calls it that at a party, and you want to be that guy. And that's it. Once our half legs are set, we will move on to our hot honey marinade, which will start, not surprisingly, with a whole bunch of honey. And I'm using a nice local wildflower honey, although I'm pretty sure anything's going to work here. And then after the sweet, before we get to the heat, we will toss in some onion powder as well as some garlic powder, followed by the first of 4 different hot peppers. And that's going to be some dried chili flakes. And I'm using Aleppo, but anything will work. And then we'll follow that with some dried ground chili, in the form of cayenne, of course. And then after the dried chilies, we'll go with some fermented chili, which I'm going to do with some Korean chili paste known as gochujang. And now that we have dried pepper and fermented pepper, let's go with some fresh pepper, which for me is going to be 1 whole habanero. Oh yes, these are hot, so be very careful. Speaking of which, we're going to have this and take the seeds out. But then instead of mincing it fine by hand, which is probably going to get on our fingers, and then on other parts of our body, I'm going to toss it into a blender cup and add some rice vinegar and some soy sauce. And then what we'll do is blitz that in the liquids, which is of course going to break it down nice and finely, without us ever having to touch it. Just don't, and I repeat, do not splash any of this in your eyes. That would be just as bad as the other scenario we're trying to avoid. And that's it. Once our 4th hot component has been incorporated, we will add all that to our marinade, and we'll take a whisk and give it a mix. And yes, I might have been able to fit all these other ingredients in the blender cup, but the more stuff in that cup, the more chance I had of splashing it in my eye, so I decided to go this route. But no matter what method you use, once that's all been thoroughly mixed up, we will transfer that into our bag of chicken, and then you know the drill. We will give that a very nice, very thoughtful, very caring massage from the outside of the bag, just to make sure that marinade's coating everything evenly, at which point we'll squeeze out the air and seal up the bag. And we'll transfer that into the fridge to marinate anywhere between not at all, up to overnight. And generally I find 2 to 3 hours is plenty, during which time it's not a bad idea to flip it over a couple times. And that's it. Once we're ready to roast, we will transfer that into some kind of baking dish. And if you're using 10 drumsticks like me, a regular 9x13 casserole dish should be perfect. And then what we'll do is arrange these into a nice single layer, as evenly spaced as possible. And then after cleaning off a few drips on the dish, we can go ahead and transfer that into the center of a 400-degree oven for about 20-25 minutes, at which point we'll pull it out, and we'll give those drumsticks a flip. Although I guess if you wanted, you could leave them where they are and just baste them. But I'm a flipper from way back, so I prefer to turn them over. And then what we'll do is pop those back in the oven, continuing to give those a flip or a baste every 15 or 20 minutes until they're cooked through, which is probably going to take about an hour total, although that depends on the size of the pieces. So that is going to be up to you. I mean, you are after all the drone of making sure that meat comes clean off the bone. But anyway, about 45 minutes later, mine looked like this. And I made sure to give them a test with the tip of a knife, which should pierce that meat super easily, all the way down to the bone with no effort. And then if we wanted, we could serve just like this, with that sauce underneath spooned over the top. But what I like to do is transfer these onto a serving plate and cover them loosely with foil, while I transfer all the sauce from the dish into a pan that I'll reduce over medium-high heat for a few minutes, or until it thickens up a little bit more. And by the way, once a sauce like this cools, it's going to be about twice as thick as it is when it's hot. So keep that in mind when you make these executive decisions on how far to go. But anyway, right about here, after reducing for about 3 minutes, it looked to be about perfect. So I pulled it off the heat and spooned it over those already amazing looking drumsticks, which, as you can see, is going to make it look even more beautiful. And yes, in case you're wondering, it is in fact going to taste as hot as it looks. And that's it. I finished up by garnishing with some freshly snipped chives from the garden. And my hot honey drumsticks were ready to enjoy. And if you're wondering what the best way to eat these is, well, it's right in the name. Just pick these up like a drumstick and take a big old bite. And that, my friends, was incredibly spicy, intensely flavorful, but not as sweet as you might think it would be. Right, when you cook and caramelize honey, it becomes much less sweet, while at the same time taking on a more complex flavor. So I really did think this was perfectly balanced. And as you can see, that meat's coming cleanly off the bone, which means it was cooked properly. And of course, this would be amazing served with so many things, but I decided to pair it with a nice herbaceous potato salad that may or may not be a chimichurri potato salad that I might show you in an upcoming video. But anyway, for a contrast, when we're serving something hot and intensely flavored, having something cold and bracing and acidic on the plate is usually a great way to go. And yes, to answer the obvious question, this would also work wonderfully with chicken thighs, or wings, or even chicken breast if you don't overcook them. But whether you use one of the 3 more popular chicken parts or not, I love this technique and how beautiful it makes the chicken look and taste. And I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.